True, yeah. Thanks, Christos. So yeah, in terms of conflicts of interest, that's actually that, because we cooperated with GW Pharmaceuticals to run the study exploring the effects of CBD in patients with schizophrenia as an addition to their antipsychotic medication, but I was ever only paid by King's College. So, a bit of a controversial topic, how to make cannabis safer by kind of manipulating the plant. I have to admit though that the actual study of 4 CBD-THC ratios, the results of that study is not yet in. But I'll talk a bit about that study if I have time. So, a bit about the background. We heard already that the cannabis plant, it has at least 144 different cannabinoids. THC and CBD are the most common ones. And they're made in the cannabis plant in these little formations around the cannabis flower. They're called trichomes. And in the little ball at the top of that trichome is the chemical factor of the cannabis plant. And if you go into it, you actually see that THC and CBD on the right-hand side are made from the same precursor chemical, another cannabinoid called CBG. Now, what cannabis growers do is that they crossbreed cannabis plants with each other. So you get a cannabis plant which genetics will tell the plant to make the CBG into mostly THC, because as a drug producer, the more THC you want, the more your product will be valuable. So by that effect, if you increase THC, you'll have to sacrifice CBD. So you get less and less of that. And conversely, if you want more CBD, the plant's not going to be as strong in THC. Now, why this is important, and this is quite old data now from 2008 in the UK, but I'll explain why that's important. So you have different preparations of cannabis. So resin on the left, we also call it hash. In the UK, it tends to come from kind of northern African parts where the strength of the cannabis was less important before, but that's now changing. But at that time, it used to have a 1-to-1 balance between THC and CBD and quite low levels of THC. However, sinsemilla, which is a Spanish word, means without seed. It reflects the way you produce cannabis. So you take all the female plants out because they're the ones that make the drugs. You restrict access to the men so they don't get any pollen. And because they don't get pollen, they don't produce seeds, and instead they produce more of these trichomes, so the cannabis plant becomes stronger. So the way that you can distinguish sinsemilla with, say, herbal cannabis that's grown outdoors is the presence of the seeds of the plant. Now, most of the cannabis available now is the sinsemilla, and that explains why cannabis has become stronger now, because that's the way people are producing it. But the reason I brought this study up is because of a next study which was done at King's College. They looked at a case control study of 400 healthy volunteers and 400 patients with psychosis. They asked them what type of cannabis they use and how often. And they found that on the right-hand side, it was a sinsemilla use every day. So you had a 5-fold increased risk of psychotic illness if you use the stronger cannabis every day. But if you look here, see, that's not, there's no pointer. Hash less than once a week, hash at weekends, and hash every day did not have an increased risk of psychosis. So using the weaker form with the additional CBD didn't have an increased risk of psychosis. So I'll bring you over to kind of my research role, which is experimental psychopharmacology. So we get healthy volunteers come. And the first study was done by my colleague Paul Morrison, 22 healthy males. They each come to 2 experiments. They get placebo on one day and 2.5 milligrams of intravenous THC on another. Now, what happened to these participants is that this on the left is the positive psychotic symptom scale, so it's called the PAN scale. So a scale that we use to measure psychotic symptoms in patients. So at 30 minutes after they've had the injection, there's a significant increase in psychotic-like symptoms. And here are some of the quotes of these participants. So it was threatening and sinister. I'm still a bit unsure of you. Your reassurance sounds insincere. I know you are reading my mind. There's an incredible disconnection between thinking and saying things. So they're quite, you know, in the phenomenology of things, they're quite psychotic. But what you need to remember is that these effects are very minute. They last for a split second sometimes, and they go away. And they only last for about the time that the drug is intoxicating the person. So this is not an actual psychotic episode, but it's just the phenomenon appears. So we were interested in the combination of THC and CBD, and in a small pilot study, Paul was visited by a journalist who wanted to be a participant. So I'm going to show you a short clip of her experience.
The Institute of Psychiatry, I've agreed to take part in a unique medical trial designed to find out. It's part of their ongoing research into the link between stronger cannabis and psychosis. The scientists are interested in the effects of the ratio between the two main components of cannabis, THC and cannabinoid. So on one day, I'm being injected with pure THC, something like ultra-high potency skunk. On the other day, I get a mixture of THC and cannabinoid, more like the natural makeup of the cannabis plant. When I get the injections, I don't know what I'm getting. It turns out that this one is a mixture of THC and cannabinoid. After 10 minutes, it hits me. With the THC and cannabinoid, no matter how hard I try to take the experiment seriously, it all seems hilarious.
The psychotic symptoms were reduced. So that led us to the next study. So we did essentially the same thing, but with many more people. We had 48 healthy volunteers, and they got 1.5 milligrams of THC this time, but with a big oral dose of CBD, so 600 milligrams. So they got randomized to get either the placebo or the CBD. So 22 people got the combination and 26 people just got THC. Now, this is a memory task. You learn a list of 12 words, and after 20 minutes, you have to remember the list as well as you can. And we saw that after THC, the people who only received THC had an 11% drop in their performance. But if they had CBD as well, there was no drop in performance. And this is a paranoia scale, so measuring paranoid thoughts. Again, if you had THC, there was an increase in paranoid thinking, but if you had a CBD tablet as well, there was no paranoia. And lastly, the occurrence of psychotic phenomena. So that happened to 11 out of 26 who got the THC only, and only 3 out of 22 who got the combination. So CBD reduced the occurrence THC came to do a documentary, so if anyone's interested in that, I have got that on a memory stick. You can get it later. But essentially, this journalist came and did all 4 experiments, so you get to see, his experiences. But what the study wanted to do is that if we can add CBD to cannabis to make it less harmful by reducing its effects on memory and paranoia and psychosis. Unfortunately, I don't have that data, but I'll still talk about the study. So in this study, we actually got medical grade cannabis from a Dutch medical company. We used a vaporizer to give it, and we have these 4 ratios. So THC only, 1:1 THC CBD, 2:1, meaning CBD is twice as much, and 3:1. If you want to see the protocols available online. The way it works is that you come in at baseline, we do some bloods and vital signs, and then we give a visual analog scale, so mood states, if you're high, if you're feeling anxious, if you're paranoid, if you're sleepy, if you're hungry. And then we give you the cannabis inhalation, you get 2 of these balloons filled with cannabis vapor. And then we get bloods at 5, 10, 15 minutes. That's followed by about half an hour of cognitive testing. There's a visual analog scale again. And then we have a chocolate and music task. So you get to eat a piece of chocolate, and you get to listen to a song that you've pre-selected. And that's to see whether or not each different type of cannabis influences the pleasurable effects of chocolate and music. Because if we develop a safer cannabis, if that's not enjoyable, the users won't take that up. So we left a bit of time for recovery, and then we do all the questionnaires of the psychological states, and then when they're fully sober, we discharge them. So totally 80 people came for the experiments, 64 were randomized, so they at least had 1 experiment, and 46 participants did all of the 4 experiments. So it's a lot of work. It's over 200 study visits, and each study visit's about 5 hours each. So this is just some of the participant demographics, even split between men and female, but I guess the most important thing is that all of these participants are quite low-level cannabis users, so on average they've used 9 times in the last year. Some of the quotes, it was like I was a queen and you were my subjects. Were you filming me during the task? Ed is one of our doctors. Every time I looked at Ed, he was more and more disappointed in me. And lastly, your ID pictures doesn't really look like you. For a little while, I believed you weren't who you said you were. Here, I just have some plasma levels, so THC gets absorbed pretty quickly and it deteriorates at 90 minutes. We see plasma levels of CBD, so the more CBD you have, the more it's available in plasma, so the study worked. These are just some metabolites of THC. I have some heart rate and blood pressure information, so heart rate goes up immediately after you've had THC, and then it slowly drops down again back to normal, but CBD didn't influence the heart rate increase of THC. Similarly, there was no really significant change between the different ratios on systolic blood pressure or diastolic blood pressure. And lastly, I do share some data with you as chocolate enjoyment, so it seems like adding CBD doesn't necessarily, or at least significantly make you enjoy chocolate more, or make you enjoy music more. So I'd like to thank my team